Okay, this video is to cover how we're going to do ARG evaluation for your essay map. And I'm going to try and approach this by contrasting how we're going to do ARG on your essay map versus how you did it on the listicle. So the first thing is that we have probably, as you've developed your map and gone through the stages to reach this point, been doing ARG evaluations informally without kind of making changes to them, without putting things on the map. But we've probably been doing those things informally. You have, I have a little bit in my feedback. Hopefully I've pointed it out maybe a little bit. To try and help develop the map, because doing so, especially, well, all three of them, helps build down the map, helps do things like add objections in or consider other reasons, things like that. So we've been doing all of those A, R, and G informally as we've been building out the map. And so at this stage, hopefully that's done, but we're going to do it formally by dressing up the map with the three components, just as our kind of final check formally to make sure nothing slipped through that development of the map. And the other reason why we're going to do this, even though we have hopefully kind of already done this job informally, is to really make us aware of key things that we can use in our ARG evaluation of our maps, of the argument in our essay, to help us get some useful meta commentary for the essay. So what I mean by that is that we can and should explicitly bring in some of this reflective commentary and evaluation of us appreciating how strong our argument is, or exactly how it works. We want to bring some of that into the essay, because if we can put some of that meta commentary into the essay, that is going to be yet another way that we're going to be able to send a message to the profs. Not only is this argument good, not only is my essay good, but I'm aware that it's good and in what ways that it is good. And if profs get that message and see that you're not just kind of grinding out an answer, but that you understand the ways in which your answer is really good, then that really reassures them that you didn't just get lucky on this essay assignment, but that you're actually good and that you know what you're talking about because you're aware of what you're talking about and how good it is. So that's one big difference with the listicle. The listicle, we were just, I'm just going to flip forward. No, actually I'm not. I'm going to go backwards here. With the listicle, because it wasn't your argument and we weren't interested in improving that argument, just seeing what was there, we just kind of mapped it, and we didn't really have to think too much about R to help us arrange things. We didn't have to build down the map because there wasn't anything really to build down. They were very superficial arguments. But as we've built down your map, we have had to do all of these things in each one of these stages. As we've added boxes, we have very likely in my feedback and in your thinking about how to build down your map and where to put boxes and things like that, you've been asking our questions, right? Is this a reason for that? And you've been thinking through that to decide whether a box belongs beneath another box or if it ought to go somewhere else. We have, as we get down to the end of your map, as we did the build down, you've been asking A questions, and so you've hit what you think might be the tip, and then you've been asking, do I need to do anything else here? No, that what I've got here, this tip should be acceptable. And then now is the time when we're going to explicitly evaluate that A, just to make sure that it actually is that you've got an end there. There might be a couple cases where we've got to put another layer in the map. Don't know. And then the G also, we've been doing that as we've been building down, getting aware of objections or other viewpoints or critiques, and we want to make sure that those make it into your paper too, because a well-rounded paper that's aware of more than just the positive case for your thesis communicates more knowledge and more understanding and more expertise to your prof or whoever's reading it, right? And that's always a good thing. But we're going to do that stuff formally. So in these slides here, I have one slide that reviews the kind of the checklist that you should have remembered. This should have been what we've seen in the listicle ARG video, and then on the next slide I'm just going to kind of emphasize a couple things that make doing A on your essay importantly different from doing A on the listicle. So just to review, remember we're doing A on every tip or end point of our map as we build it down, and so that includes co-premises, that includes objections, that includes rebuttals, orange boxes. Anything that doesn't have another green box directly underneath it needs a blue box, needs a blue basis box. Okay, and we need to identify the source briefly and concisely. Where did you get this from, that claim? And then you need to articulate. You don't need to back up and say, I like this, or I think it's true, or here's some more information to back up what the green box above this said. Nope. Just articulate the trustworthiness or reliability of the source. Don't talk about the claim. Talk about the source the claim came from. Okay? And you obviously want to sum up that A judgment overall, the words that you put in there, with an overall X, check, or question mark, and probably, hopefully, for every tip of your essay's argument, you want a check mark, right? But don't just put a check mark because, well, I need one there. If, as you articulate it and you're wondering about the reliability or trustworthiness of that source, you're thinking maybe this is a question mark, then maybe we got to think about adding another green box underneath it that's more acceptable on its own, or trying to find another source that would be more trustworthy that will still say the same thing as what's in the green box. All right, so A evaluation is a lot different than listicles, primarily in the sense that those listicles were dumb and fairly superficial in their use of sources. Of course, they were just clickbait, so they weren't really pushing the envelope at all with acceptability. They were really not caring whether or not people accepted what they were saying, and often we had to guess about where they got their claims. We had to guess so often that you probably had more than one of the premises in your listicle use the assertion basis box, where you were basically saying that the author said this and I don't really know the author, so question mark or X or something like that. So it's should be easier to do A on your essay because you should know your sources. You shouldn't have to guess, well, where did I get this from, right? You should know exactly, well, this one, common belief. This one, I cited it over here. This one I got from that study. You should already kind of know those things, so it should be easy to decide on the category and know how to identify the sources for every claim, for every starting point on your map. The thing that might make this a little bit trickier is that we need to evaluate each one of those sources, not on whether you accept it, because that's probably a given, right? But we want to worry about your prof, right? Is your prof going to find these sources acceptable? You kind of have to critique, reassure yourself that if you are citing your own personal experience, well, maybe your prof doesn't have that personal experience. So we got to find a different source, or else your prof, this might be like a starting point that they just can't get on board with, right? If it's common belief, okay, but we have to worry about maybe the prof is in a special group that's not part of most people who commonly believe that thing already. So we got to kind of slightly worry about that maybe. If you decide that it's kind of a questionable source, or that it's maybe too controversial and not going to be acceptable to a large enough group or to your prof in particular, then you got to think, okay, well, what maybe I need to add another green box that's a reason to believe that thing, not just a source that points at the box that I'm talking about right now, to make it a less controversial and back it up, and then we'll add a blue box underneath that additional green box. But usually that's rare. Usually we've worked that stuff out informally before this point. So the key things here are to make sure that you identify the source, name it, okay, and that we have to evaluate the reliability of the source. We're not in the business of expanding on the discussion in the green box, adding more details, anything like that. That's not what blue boxes, that's not what basis boxes are for. All right. When it comes to R, here's the regular stuff that we did with the listicle is exactly what we're going to do with your essay, right? Now your essay's got a lot more boxes, so there's a lot more stuff to shade. We need to shade green boxes. We also need to shade red boxes, not just the top row, but everything. But even though there's probably a lot more boxes on your essay, I'm still gonna stick with 2 yellow R notes per diagram, right? So for the whole map, no matter how busy it is, just 2 R notes is fine. But you should, in principle, be able to do an R note for every box to justify the shading that you did, right? Because the R notes are how you articulate the shading that you gave a box, right? Again, listicles pretty dumb and straightforward. You might have some pretty straightforward and obvious links where it's easy to write an R note articulating that link and justifying it. I would encourage you, though, to not just pick the ones that seem easiest to write, one of those counterfactual if-then statements in the R note, but pick key connections, pick important connections. So if you have, a part of your map where you've got one key reason and the map just explodes underneath it, so the link between that and the box above it really has to carry all the weight of the big branches underneath it, then maybe we ought to evaluate that box explicitly and put an R note on it so that we can reassure ourselves this link is strong and it's going to be able to carry the weight of all that support, channel through it up into the thesis. So that's what I would call kind of an important link. I would encourage you to put an R note there, not just to kind of check for yourself, but also for that meta commentary purpose. If you have really key links in your map, not only do you want to make sure that they kind of carry the load and can do the job that you have them in your map for, but we're probably also going to want to call out that link as being especially important for our reader and be able to articulate why we think the link works and is strong. Okay? We want to do that for our prof, right? We want to point out, look, this is a really important part of my argument. It's crucial, and I appreciate why it works and that it works, right? If we're doing this for real life, not for a school essay, right, but for something else that we're arguing for, you really want to make sure for key controversial maybe leaps between one claim and another claim when maybe it's not obvious to everybody. You're worried maybe this is an important link I have here and might not be obvious to everybody why the truth of this matters to the truth of that. You might want to spell out the link as you see it, articulate that relevance so that if somebody is really kind of not understanding that connection, that you articulating it really helps them see that this is an important link and that it works. Okay. Also, you're probably going to be tempted just to go and click everything and be strongly relevant. Resist doing that. It's totally okay to have weakly relevant reasons. Not every box is going to be connected to the box above it such that, it's absolutely crucial for this box to be true. If it was false, it would make me totally change my mind about the box above it. Especially if you have 2 or 3 reasons that are all supporting one box. All of them could be weakly relevant, but collectively, that's a really strong batch of reasons to believe the truth of the box above, right? So not everything needs to be strong. But we probably don't want any gray boxes, because if it really doesn't matter, then it probably shouldn't be included. We should then be questioning, does this actually belong in the essay? And at this point, it was there for a reason, but maybe this is our final check just to make sure, maybe we need to move this box to somewhere else where it is more relevant, where it matters to something else. Maybe we just misplaced a box. The third, the G questions, same thing as listicles. Pick 2 of these, answer 2 of these. I mean, you should be able to answer all 4, but we're just going to pick 2, okay? And unlike the listicles, again, hopefully your argument isn't going to have G answers, that are going to be really critical, right? And negative towards your map and say, man, this guy hadn't done this, or this part's not convincing, or something like that. What we're doing here is probably going to have G answers that are what I'm calling weak, right? That is, they're not super critical or negative, right? And that don't require edits to the map. Because we should have already, in our informal looking at the map and going, have we built it out enough? Have we covered all our bases kind of thing? That was us thinking about G, right? So this is a final check just to make sure that we didn't miss anything. We're doing this formally, right? But even those answers won't be highly critical, right? So for instance, if we're talking about the potential underminers question, right? You should always be able to think up some objection that didn't quite make it into the map. But for your essay map, right, that objection probably is going to be not anything we really have to worry about, right? Okay, somebody could object that X, right? This part of my, right, this claim that's in my map right here, somebody could object, that's not true because something, right? But hopefully, when you think about those things, when you're here doing the formal G's, the G questions, you're going to conclude, yeah, that's like 2% of the population, or that's only people in this kind of situation who would have this as a legitimate objection, right? And so your answers are going to be weak in that they're not big problems, big issues with the strength of your argument, and they're not going to require edits to the map. But we still want to be aware of that stuff, right? Because it's, again, cool kind of meta commentary to add to your essay, right? So maybe some objection, some potential underminer, really not worth talking about to any great extent because only a very small group of people have that objection and it's not a really strong one or something like that. But if you're looking for something neat and reflective to add to, say, your conclusion, this would be the ideal thing to do, right? Oh yeah, and there's this group of cranky people here who would have an objection like that, but you know what? They can be unhappy. I think I can convince 98% of everybody else, so I don't need to worry about that group, right? Having a commentary like that is going to be, again, one of those things that's going to send a clear message to the prof. Not only have I presented to you a good argument, but I know it's good, and I know why it's good, and I know all of the extent, the limits of its goodness. And if we can communicate that through meta commentary like this, breaking that fourth wall, right, and really turning around and critiquing our argument explicitly for its quality, that sends a really strong message to a prof that you know exactly what's going on and you have total control over your argument. It's a very powerful kind of message to send to your prof that you have your head screwed on straight. All right, so that was quick, right? Of course, the details of doing this are probably going to be a little bit of back and forth between you and me through Canvas, through you submitting stuff. So my last kind of piece of advice here is don't invest a lot of time in doing this stuff. You only had practice with the listicle. The essay stuff might be look a lot different, feel a lot different for you to do the ARG, and you might be a little bit hesitant. So do a little bit of the A, do a little bit of R, do a little bit of G, like do one R note, do a couple A basis boxes, right? Answer a couple G question and submit that just to get feedback from me and reassurance that you're on the right track. Okay?